afternoon, everyone. I am Pat Whitlow, and I'm the Director of Nationally Competitive Awards here at UK, and we are probably going to take, well, no, actually, we're right on time. So we're so delighted to have so many students register for this panel. We're really delighted to be able to offer it for you. I think we are going to begin with a little poll question for all of our participants. So Lynn, if you'll go ahead and put that up. So if we can get everybody to respond. I'll go ahead and make a few comments, and then Lynn, in a couple of seconds, you can give us the results, or I guess you post the results. I want to thank everyone for your interest in this panel, which is being sponsored by the Chelgren Center for Undergraduate Excellence, the Office of Nationally Competitive Awards, and the Office of Undergraduate Research. And these are all offices that I strongly encourage you to seek out during your time at UK. Hopefully the sooner the better. We have on this meeting today students who are in high school now, and have students taking summer courses at UK who are brand new students at UK and will be coming in for their first year in the fall. We have some of you who just completed your first year, so we're really delighted to have a lot of different types of students who've registered, and we want to welcome you today. I also want to thank our distinguished panel of faculty who agreed to share their expertise today. And I'm going to give you a little bit more of an introduction in a few minutes. But first, we have a few business announcements that we'll make. But Lynn, would you like to share the poll about the participants? Oh. So we have a lot of people who have not participated in research, so this is wonderful. You're going to get a lot of great information, and then we have, another half have a little research in different settings. So that's wonderful. We're a very diverse group today. Thank you. This presentation is being recorded, so I just want to let everybody know that up front. We are going to put this on the Chelgren Facebook page as a recording so that other students can watch later. Not everyone was able to be here at this time. It will probably also be featured as a link on. I think I got muted there. I'm sorry. So it will be linked on the website of the sponsoring offices as well. And I also want to remind everyone, you've probably been in a Zoom meeting before, but if you haven't, at the bottom of your screen, there's the chat box. And you can type in questions or comments there, and the more the better. We're going to be delighted to hear from you. And I and my colleagues on this call will be monitoring those questions, and I will try to ask some throughout the panel, and I will also leave time at the conclusion to get more of the questions in. If you have a question that you prefer to ask yourself, or you really need to because it's a complicated question, just let us know through the chat box and what your name is, and I will call on you, and then you can unmute and ask your own question if that works better for you. I believe everyone is muted at this time except for myself and hopefully our faculty participants. So you would have to unmute yourself to ask a question. Right now, I'm going to share some faculty bios with you, and we're going to move through these. These are very encapsulated for our faculty. So I want to strongly encourage all of you who would like to know more about the research of these faculty members and their backgrounds to go look at their bios and CVs on the university websites. And I think that's probably a tip they will be talking about later in the panel. But they all have very distinguished records, and it's more than I can adequately recount today. So I encourage you to do that. I will introduce in alphabetical order. Dr. Fanny Chaplin is, you can give a wave there if people can't see your name, is a research assistant professor in the Department of Biomedical Engineering in the College of Engineering. Her lab develops non-invasive magnetic resonance imaging, which is MRI methods, to track immune cell migration to foci of inflammation in different pathologies, such as transplant rejection, autoimmune diseases, and cancer. Dr. Chaplin began at UK in the fall of 2019 after completing her PhD in bioengineering at the University of California, San Diego. So she's fairly new to UK as well. She also did a master's degree in France. So that would make an interesting item to ask her a question about later in the panel, just give you a hint. Dr. Michael Kilgore, where is Dr.? There he is, putting his hand up. He is an associate professor in the Department of Pharmacology and Nutritional Sciences in the College of Medicine. His lab has made key discoveries involving the role of PPAR gamma in cancer, including its overexpression in breast, ovarian, lung, and prostate cancer. Dr. Kilgore earned his doctoral degree in biochemistry, molecular biology at Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center in 1990. And he came to UK in 2000 after a stint at Clemson. And he was a Children Faculty Fellow in the 2019-20 academic year. Dr. Phil Kramer, put your hand up, Phil, there we go, is a professor in the Department of Psychology in the College of Arts and Sciences. Dr. Kramer earned his PhD in psychology from the University of Western Ontario in Canada, and he started teaching at UK in 1989. In 2008, he became the Chelgren Endowed Chair for the Chelgren Center for Undergraduate Excellence, and his research has focused on an array of issues in cognitive science and philosophy of mind, with applications to education and the psychology of innovation. And Dr. Eduardo Santillan Jimenez is there. He's sort of in the bottom of my screen. Is a principal research scientist at the UK Centre for Applied Energy Research, and the acronym for that is CARE, but it's C-A-E-R for those of you who are looking for it. And he is also an adjunct faculty member in the Department of Chemistry. His current research focuses on the application of heterogeneous catalysis to the production of renewable fuels and chemicals, with emphasis on the upgrading of biomass-derived oils to drop-in hydrocarbon fuels. Dr. Santillan Jimenez earned his doctoral degree from the UK Department of Chemistry in 2008, and then he spent time as a postdoctoral researcher at Utrecht University in the Netherlands before returning to UK in 2010. Each faculty member is now going to take 2 or 3 minutes. They're going to briefly explain to you the type of research that's done in their area by undergraduates. And I think we'll start in backwards order this time. So Dr. Santillan Jimenez, if you want to begin.
Sure thing. Thank you, Dr. Whitlow, and hello, everyone. As Dr. Whitlow mentioned, I am based at the Center for Applied Energy Research. This is one of the research centers at the University of Kentucky. We do not grant degrees, but we work with several departments at the university with students performing research in our labs. Personally, I'm in the biofuels and environmental catalysis group. In my group, we focus on catalytic methods to convert biomass to renewable fuels and chemicals. We also do some automotive catalysis. We also do some carbon capture with algae-based technology. But other groups at CAER work on cementitious materials like low carbon cements, advanced carbon materials like carbon fibers, carbon capture and utilization. And these are just some of the lines of research that we have. Because of that, most of the students that work with us have a science or engineering background. A lot of chemical engineers, material engineers, even electrical engineers we have hosted. But sometimes we've been able to get creative and host folks from other departments, like biology, for instance, because of the algae work that we have going. We even hosted several College of Design students to help us with the design of certain technologies. And so that's just a very brief overview of what we do at CAR, the kind of students that we work with. And if you would like to learn more, you can either ask or look at our website, which is fairly descriptive.
Thank you, Dr. Santillan Jimenez. Why don't we begin with you now, Dr. Kramer?
Okay, this is very weird. How are you all? I can't see any of you. I'm still adjusting to what you take quite easily, this new technology and the like. My own research somewhat exemplifies, I think, one of the really cool features of psychology. It's a very broad field. There are questions that my colleagues are asking at the very biological end. I have other colleagues who are asking questions at the very applied end, and all areas in between. In my own research, I began with an interest in learning, memory, and cognition, and that emanates, as I'm thinking of it now, from a research mentorship experience I had as an undergraduate. I really had no clue what I wanted to do. I majored in psychology for reasons I don't really understand, and I happened on this professor and was able to do actual hands-on research. And that really shaped my entire career. I found it not only intrinsically rewarding and satisfying, but it also gave me some focus. And I realized a lot of students are in that same position. We don't really understand much about our disciplines. We don't really understand what's available. So I hope that seminars like this can help encourage you to begin to explore and get involved. It is one of the strengths of UK. We are a research university, and that means something special, and we may talk about that later on. But in terms of psychology, my own research really typifies much of the breadth of the field. I began with studying human memory, and then I moved into studying memory and learning and cognition in other species, comparative psychology. I then took a turn toward much more biological and much more applied research. I worked with colleagues in the medical center here at UK on closed head injury research, looking at cognitive deficits. We developed some animal models of closed head injury. And then more recently, I have become enthralled with cognitive science, which is really more than just psychology, but it certainly includes psychology and some other disciplines as well: computer science, artificial intelligence, neuroscience, linguistics, anthropology. But more recently, the most recent research that I've been involved in, again, has been much more applied and very different from where I started. I did a number of projects on virtual worlds, and we're in one right now. But the platform that we use was something called Second Life. It involves a make-believe world that you log onto, and you create an avatar, and then you inhabit this unusual space where you interact with other avatars. And in Second Life, much of that space was meant to simulate the real world. There were parks, there were dance clubs, there were sports, there were a whole variety of things, much of what you see in the real world. And our interest was in looking at whether that psychology of being an avatar is very different or not so different from being a real human being in a real world. And along the way,
thank you, Dr. Kramer.
Okay, one more thing, if I could, is that getting students involved early on, and this is what I want you students to think about, it's an opportunity for you to really develop a career of research here at UK. So I think we'll say more about that early on. Some of you have had no experience, others have had some. But it's a chance to really create, by the time you're done, a real profile of experience. Sorry.
Thank you. Dr. Kilgore?
How's everybody today? So I'm in the College of Medicine, and we are a fairly large unit. We are made up of 7 different departments with well over 200 faculty working in a wide range of things, from very basic biochemistry and molecular modeling at X-ray crystallographic levels to more applied drug development is my world to a limited extent, and more basic science that way, all the way up through behavioral sciences. So we do have a department of behavioral sciences within the college that does more applied work with overdose and drugs of abuse and a variety of other things. And we have behavioral work that goes on inside of labs that actually spans some of those. I have a colleague that looks at animals and how they run through mazes and whether they can function well, and then we take parts of their brain and determine how they're working at the neurological level as well. So it's a very broad and expansive set of studies, which makes finding out some of what we do a little bit difficult, because I will warn you, digging through our websites can be a bit taxing. So when you get into a department, you get into a faculty is one approach, and that takes some time. I would encourage you, to reach out to one of us, and certainly me, if there are specific sorts of things that you might be of interest to you at some point in the future, and perhaps I can guide you towards some of our faculty, because keeping up our websites is not what they fund us to do, so some of us are not as good about that as some of the others. I'd like to real quick comment on something Dr. Kramer just said, and not only a portfolio of science, but much of what I learned and enjoyed and learned from came from the lab rather than in classroom, where you can take what you learn in the class and apply it in the lab. And it's that sort of setting that actually can spark and fire some interests to do other things. And don't feel like, that if you don't know, I want to work on, breast cancer like I do, then you don't know what you're doing. I started my life as a parasitologist, and like Dr. Kramer, I've had some evolutions in my career working on different things. And most of us are just interested in solving problems, and that's what you have the opportunity to do. So again, we multi-departmental structure within our unit, and finding some of us may be a challenge, but to reach out and we'll have more chance to talk.
Thank you, Dr. Kilgore. And Dr. Chaplin, if you will unmute, thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Whitlow, for the introduction. As Dr. Whitlow mentioned, I specifically work on tagging and imaging specific cells in the body to better understand certain pathologies, such as cancer or autoimmune diseases. But in the broad spectrum in biomedical engineering in general, we are trying to harness our engineering expertise to address clinical needs in the hospital, and we're really working on this collaboration with the medicine side. And those are usually very transdisciplinary projects in all the labs that work here, and we really try to involve students throughout their career and their training. We have high school students, undergrad students, graduate students, and at every step there is an opportunity for you to learn. I personally like to involve my students at every step of the research project, getting training on the laboratory techniques, helping in summarizing those findings in manuscripts, applying for fellowships to continue doing research, and also presenting the work that they have done in the lab. And I'm sure we will talk more about that very shortly.
Yes, thank you very much. I believe we have another poll question for the students at this time.
We actually have 2. The first one is what status you are at UK. Or here goes the first one. Okay. Just a few more seconds. Okay. We have a very good mix.
Welcome to all of you.
And then the last poll question is just to tell us what type of research that you are interested in. Okay, about 5 more seconds.
And while we're doing that, I may have Lynn share that in a little bit after she gets all your responses. I am going to just mention the first question that we have for our faculty panelists. And we're going to have probably 2 or 3 of our faculty panelists address each question, but perhaps not each individual. But it may be that a faculty will weigh in if they feel like they have something particular to say. For students who want to begin their research in the fall, what things can they do this summer to arrange a research placement? Dr. Kilgore, would you like to start by commenting on this?
Sure. So I guess I alluded to the first hurdle you're going to have to go over, and that's to think about the sort of field you're interested in, and then find faculty within that that are doing something that is of interest to you. And so we tend to have some focus themes at the College of Medicine. We do cancer, diabetes, neuroscience, and cognition, and we actually have a big emphasis in infectious disease that's gone on more recently, but we've had it ongoing. So identify somebody and reach out to them. I mean, you're going to hear the same thing over and over, but you know, there are faculty that are have certain projects that are more or less amenable to undergraduates being in their lab, and some are not. So the ones that don't reach back to you are one thing. But do your homework, find somebody, find out what they do. Look at their websites, look at their papers. I cannot stress this enough. Look at a couple of recent papers and find out what they're doing, the sorts of technologies they're doing, for instance, because technology can drive other research projects like Dr. Chaplin's talking about. So that would be my first suggestion.
Dr. Kramer, since you have been at UK for a long time and you work with the Children's Center that specifically focuses on getting students involved in research, that made you sound old, my apologies. But would you like to talk to students about what you suggest for a beginning?
Am I unmuted now? Could you hear me?
Yes.
Sure. I think listen to everything Dr. Kilgore said. He's always correct. I would only add a couple of things. It's going to be hard until we actually get face-to-face, but you can look at websites. But I would say do more than just look at websites. We have really good websites nowadays that faculty are describing their research programs. So begin to read through those, but then take it further. In some cases, you may want to begin to look up some of the publications they mention. Now, you may not be able to understand all those publications in great detail, but you'll get a sense of the kind of research they do. But another suggestion, and it may not seem obvious, there's something called UK News. And that's a publication that comes out, I think, is it daily, Dr. Whitlow?
Yes. Are you talking about the UK Now articles?
UK Now, I'm sorry. It's a website, but there's a section in there on research. And you can oftentimes gather who's doing what, and you may learn the names of some other faculty to get a hold of. But I would really try to do a lot of exploring on your own based on the web resources we have at UK, and then taking it further, looking at that research in terms of what other sources you may find. Most undergraduates are going to work within their discipline, meaning their major or their second major or maybe their minor. So you can also begin to look at what you've already learned about the topics you have and see if there's a way to match what you may be interested in with what faculty interest may be here at UK.
And do either of our other faculty panelists have anything additional to add there?
Well, if I may, being kind of parochial, CAR is actually based off campus. We're close to the horse park of Ironworks Pike. And so a pretty good idea would be to figure out the type of logistics involved. Namely, if you happen to lack transportation, then it will be complicated. Sadly, we're not served by public transport. And so that type of logistical consideration, it's important to keep in mind. I would also say you have to recognize that a particular lab may be at capacity. Maybe they're fully staffed and they just simply cannot take another person right then and there. Funding may be something to consider, either because all of the funding has been assigned by a particular researcher. And so if you line up your own funding, and we can talk more about that, then you may be a particularly attractive student for that lab to incorporate in their workforce. And lastly, if you have already identified the type of lab that you would like to work in, and you know the type of training that is required, I can speak more intelligently about STEM areas. If you're going to work in a chemistry lab, for instance, you would need lab safety, chemical hygiene, hazardous waste, fire extinguisher, chemical fume hood, etc. Those are trainings that are available online. So if you already have those, when you contact a particular researcher, same thing, it will show that you're serious, that you already took the first steps necessary for you to join their lab and make you more competitive. And very lastly, working with students that already work in those labs, either other undergrads, grad students that are either there or have previously worked there, would get you a good idea of, is that lab a nice place to work with? What type of work do they do? What kind of training is required? Those would be other considerations that may be worth also having.
And if I could ask Lynn now, would you like to share? And we'll look at what our participants actually, where they would actually like to do their research. Okay, so we are a STEM heavy group, and then it looks like life sciences are our next big area, and we thought that would probably be the case because that's where our faculty panel's interests lie. But we also want, for those of you who are interested in other fields, we are going to try to probably do another panel later this summer with faculty who focus in a different set of areas. And we also want to say to all of you, students are doing research in every academic discipline on campus. And so there are ways to get involved within your major or within your specific interest area. You can do research outside your college as well. Maybe you didn't realize you could do that, but Dr. Kilgore could probably talk about that, because being in the College of Medicine, you know, we have lots of undergraduates doing research over there that aren't necessarily having their majors there. So thank you very much for that. Let me ask the faculty, is it okay for students to reach out to faculty in the summer about research possibilities for fall 2020? Since we'll be coming back to campus this year on August 17th, should a student do that? Is that a feasible thing for a student to do? Dr. Chaplin, would you like to start us off?
Yes, thank you. I think it's never too early to contact a faculty mentor, possible faculty mentor, as soon as the interest rises, or if you are able to join a lab. I think it is a good time to reach out to a faculty mentor. And the more experience you can get in a lab, obviously, the more attractive then your skill set will be. There are a lot of opportunities on campus, in particular for summer research stipends, and those require that you spend at least, I think, one semester in the lab before the summer. So definitely try to have a lab set up as early as possible.
Are there other faculty who would like to comment on that? Would you be fine with a student reaching out to you via email this summer, Dr. Kilgore?
Okay, so first of all, understand that Dr. Kramer just described it beautifully. I mean, all of us are in science because someone put up with us when we knew nothing, right? So we not only have enjoyed that process, but owe it back, okay? So don't be afraid of faculty. I've only seen a few get, angry, okay? It's not a big deal. And the other thing that Dr. Chapman said, you can't start early enough. So in the lab, we work with hazardous material all the time. I've got a fume hood. I've got a biological hood. We keep ourselves safe. So, just because there's a frightening times with COVID, we have labs that work with nastier things in COVID in our labs all the time. So it can be done safely. And so we're not shutting down. All the labs are opening back up. So yes, absolutely. Contact early and contact often until you find some combination that's going to work for you, both time-wise and the sort of interest you have out there. So I agree with both of those all the way.
Dr. Kramer, did you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I would only caution you in terms of emailing faculty. I'd recommend you do it, but realize I like to complain about students not responding to my emails. The only group that's worse than students in responding to emails are faculty. So don't be surprised if you send out an email and you don't get a response. Now, it's also the case that a number of faculty will be gone during the summer. Many of them do research other places. So you can't, you got to persist a little bit, but you don't want to beat a dead horse. But you can try through email. But if you're going to do that, I would recommend really thinking carefully about the email you send, because this is your first introduction to that faculty member. So be very thoughtful about it. Do a little research, understand what they're interested in, and send them a meaningful email, not excessively long, but not just one sentence, hey, how are you? I want to do research with you. You want to just introduce yourself and explain a little bit about yourself and ask them to say a little more about their research. But I think email is the modus operandi these days.
If I could follow up on that one real quick point. I tell this to my own children and everybody else. Start out professional, be professional, possibly can. Put that best foot forward. You can't redo that. And if it's like Dr. Kramer was saying, if you come out and say, hey, how you doing today? You're less likely to be taken seriously. So put your best foot forward on it.
Our next question, you guys may have talked about some of the items, but we'll bring it up anyway and see what other information we can get. What steps would a potential faculty mentor like for a student to take prior to contacting them? And I know we did talk about reading the personal webpage if available, reviewing their CV if they can find it online, taking some of their necessary training. Are there other things that you would like for them to think about prior to contacting you? Dr. Chaplin.
Yes, all those are great points. And I think another thing to think about before reaching out to a faculty mentor is evaluating for yourself how much of a time commitment you are ready to put into the lab experience. A lot of us are very willing to teach you everything we know, but we also want a fruitful collaboration with you. And therefore, a lot of us have some expectation of how long are you going to stay with us. Usually just a semester is not enough for you to really achieve something also for yourself. So really thinking ahead of time, am I ready to commit to a good number of hours every week, to commit to a full semester, to commit to a full year, is something that will come up in a conversation with a mentor that is interested in working with you. And that would be great if you had thought of that ahead of time.
That's an excellent point. Dr. Kramer, would you also like to talk about some of the ways that students can participate in research for credit perhaps a 395?
Yeah, a lot of departments, if not most, if not all these days, are encouraging students to participate in undergraduate research for credit. In psychology, it would be a psychology 395. And in many departments, these are available for variable credit, 1, 2, or 3. I've typically worked with students who would get the 3 credits, but during the summer, it's possible to do even more credits, but that's during a normal summer. This is anything but a normal summer. So I think another source, if you were looking to try to find a mentor in a particular department, say your major, is each department has a director of undergraduate studies. And I would not hesitate to contact them with, especially if you really don't know who you want to work with or how to go about doing it. They should be available to help you get off the ground. And then certainly if you are already a UK student, talking to your peers, getting a sense of what your colleagues have done, who they've worked with, and how they've gone about doing that.
Any other comments from any of the faculty about steps you'd like students to take prior to reaching out?
Yeah, I can elaborate on some things that both Dr. Chaplin and Kramer said, and that is that you really have to think of it in terms of a match. The fact that it's just like dating, right? The fact that you want to date something doesn't mean that you're going to end up dating them. You know, the other person also has something to say about this. And so, for instance, if students want to work, just to use an example that I'm familiar with, they want to work at CAR and they want to work in certain line of research, you have to take into account that we are in a remote location. So it will take time for students to get from campus to CAR. If they then have a class, they also have to take, the time to go back. And some of the, say, experiments that we will be performing may last 6 hours. So things really have to work out in terms not only of the relationship that students would have within lab that spans longer than, say, a semester, but also within a semester, the schedule and their availability becomes important. If students come to us and say, I can work in your lab on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9:30 to 10:45, we're basically going to say that just won't work. And it's not that we don't, want to work with them. It's just that it's just not a good match for the type of work that we do. And so if they happen to encounter that, they just have to students would just have to take into account that the fact that a particular line of research or lab is not a good match doesn't mean that research is out of the question. They will just need to find another lab that matches their schedule better.
I want to ask, we have a question from one of our participants. This is Miss Beatty, who actually is a colleague here. And she said, what advice do you have for high school students? We have several current high schoolers in our participant group. What are the things that you might suggest for them specifically? Yes.
CAR does host a fair amount of high school students. The best possible way in which they can become involved is through an already established program. And there are plenty of those. We work with 5 different programs. I always forget the acronyms, but the experience-based program, Dunbar has its own. UK also has the University Scholars program. So specifically for high school students, it may greatly facilitate things if they line up a research experience through one of these already established frameworks, if you will. Not to say that lining their own is not possible, but it just facilitates everything for everybody involved, for the high school student, for the faculty. It helps dealing with, say, liability issues, permits, minors in the lab considerations. So that would be my suggestion.
And we're getting several questions in the chat box, by the way, so I'm delighted at all of you. I do want to go back very quickly and ask just one, for the faculty to be a little bit specific. In an introductory email to a research mentor, what should a student include? Dr. Chaplin, what would you like to see? In addition to their time, their available time, how much of their background do you need to know?
I think, as some of our colleagues mentioned, it's good to have a small idea about the student's background, their training and their possible experience if they have some already. And it is also nice to see that they have indeed, as it was mentioned before, read about the research that is being done in the lab, and that they have a vague understanding of what the big picture research will be, and that they're ready to do this type of research. And again, in a very professional and formal way. I think those are all good points to catch the attention of a possible mentor.
And I would say to students, it's always a good idea to be as specific as you can. I think students are often very vague, and I understand that you don't know exactly. I realize this is very difficult what we're asking, but you can be very specific about your own experiences. You can be specific about the schedule that you have. You can be, but a lot of times students will send out an email that's so vague that it doesn't help the faculty see what it is you've actually done in the past. So it would be better to be more specific about your experience, even if your experience is minimal to none. You know, it would be better to say that. Dr. Kramer or Dr. Kilgore, maybe both of you had a comment.
I would only add that you could sort of just probe in general through an opening email, say a little bit about yourself, your background, your interest, and then ask the question, are you, to the faculty member, are you going to serve as a mentor for students? And then it may be a subsequent email or a phone call where you actually get into the details.
Dr. Kilgore?
Yeah, I'd like to follow it up because I think Dr. Kramer's right on, and Dr. Jimenez said something the same thing. You know, that introductory email, you're trying to pique our interest and your interest. It's the dating thing, right? And so I saw another comment. Maybe I could address that. So you're trying to reach into this faculty and say, hey, you know, do you have an interest? Is this something that may fit? And so emails are a pretty crummy way to communicate most of the time. So the Zoom concept that was asked in one of the chat, that would be the second contact. Say, if you would have time, would you mind talking to me? And, you know, just try to get the dialogue started. And that's really what you're trying to accomplish in that first email, I think.
I want to bring up a comment from Jenna Jotz. It's in the chat box. I don't know if everyone can see it. Jenna, if it's okay, I'll read it. My advice about being involved, or would you like to read it?
Either one.
Okay. My advice about being involved in high school is if you already have a particular interest or field of interest, start reading up on current literature in that field. Even if it's a broad interest, by becoming familiar and educated with the language used in the field, you will be ahead of other students when you do begin college. And I think that's wonderful advice.
Yes.
Even if you don't understand exactly what you're reading, I had to ask Dr. Kilgore how to pronounce something in his bio. PPAR gamma is never how I would have interpreted the term. So it's important to, you know, just do that, some of that research. Every field has its own acronyms and things that it would be helpful if you had some sense of what those are. We also have several questions here that I think we could perhaps go fairly quickly. Please note that Dr. Chaplin did put on the link for online safety trainings for those of you who would like to look at that. We had someone who said, how do we mention our schedule to the researcher? And I think you can talk about your class. I think they can just tell you when their classes are and say, I have, Thursday afternoons open and all day Fridays or whatever. I mean, that's what you're looking, right? You're not generally looking, for more than that, but just blocks of time usually. I would say to students, sometimes there are students who are doing work outside of a weekday. There might be something going on in the evening, or there might be animals that have to be maintained on weekends. And so there sometimes are things that are outside of a normal weekday, but a lot of times the faculty might need you in a lab more during a regular day as well. So you would want to find that out. We also have a question from Robin. Do people offer research opportunities during winter break, especially with the extended time this year? And I assume they're talking about the fact that the students will be leaving at Thanksgiving and doing their finals, and so we'll have a longer time away from UK. How will that affect our faculty labs and research opportunities? Dr. Kilgore?
The labs don't shut down. Come on, yeah, this is how we work. So, I mean, we may take a day or a few days around Christmas or something like that, but labs function. So, yeah, those are great opportunities while you're not distracted to get more time and interact with the postdocs and students and everything else in the lab. Absolutely.
Excellent point. Let me see. We have another question here that I just managed to move the screen. So how many hours a week are expected from students?
That is entirely dependent on the type of research that is going to take place, but there is a cost-benefit analysis associated with all of this. I mean, it is a time investment on the part of the staff in the lab to train a new person, to get them started with all the say safety certificates that are necessary. There's paperwork involved because if students are performing research for compensation, they are technically an employee. So all of these things have to be taken into account, because if all of this is going to be done, so students work in the lab for a couple of hours every week, it may not be, sadly, to put it bluntly, worth the effort. And to make things even more complicated, if they have a scattered type of schedule that just does not align with the type of work being performed, that only complicates things further. So going back to the question of what is well received during a first contact, if a student ever says in their initial email, I want to perform work in your lab, I'm at the stage of developing my schedule. What type of schedule would be more conducive to working in your lab? Clearing entire days or entire, say, afternoons? If students were to do that, it really, really, really conveys how serious they are about doing this and how much they prioritize it. And so, yeah.
That's an excellent point. And someone did ask the question, I want to make everyone aware, are professors, by and large, currently accepting Zoom meetings as another form of entry-level communication from research opportunities? And I believe that Dr. Chaplin said she is willing to do that. And I think that will vary by faculty. I'm assuming the faculty in the group will say that will be something would vary. Some faculty might not have a lot of time for Zoom meetings, or may want you to be a little more advanced before a Zoom meeting. Or do you have any particular comment about that? Okay. All right.
I just think a lot of colleagues have been holding Zoom meetings to interview potential students. So with the current situation, it's definitely the way it's shifting towards.
Wonderful. That is good to know. I have a student, Jesse, I'm going to ask your question, but you may have to be prepared to unmute because I'm not sure I completely understand. I'm going to ask it. I want to participate in undergraduate research and continue on to graduate research, but I've heard that it affects one's career path post-graduation. Is this true? And if it is, how can I work around this? I'm assuming that it would affect your career path post-graduation, but I'm assuming that that would be a great thing. But I'm wondering from this, it sounds like you think it might not be an entirely good thing. So I don't know if that's a misinterpretation of the question. So Jesse, if you're out there and would like to unmute.
Yeah, so I actually do think, I feel like it's going to be disadvantageous towards me because I plan on going into a corporate institution, working in the industry as an engineer, you know, maybe as a professional licensed engineer. I'm a mechanical engineering major right now. I've had this conception, I don't know if it's a misconception, but this conception that if I participate in research for undergrad and maybe go on to research in grad school, it's going to affect my applications to jobs for professional engineering positions. Yeah.
And Dr. Santillan Jimenez, you guys are in the College of Engineering. What advice would you give to students who plan to go into industry?
I would say that it's actually the other way around. If you are dead set on that career path, namely a position in industry, what really should happen during your college years, it's a co-op or an internship at one of those type of institutions. And the very best way of getting the very best possible internship or co-op at one of those institutions is by having academic research experience beforehand. At the end of the day, research that you perform in a university lab or research that you perform in a company lab have several things in common, you know, like keeping a lab notebook, behaving professionally. And so if you take it like stepwise, frankly, if you're a freshman and you manage to like score like an amazing internship or co-op in Google, then, you know, like great for you. But at least in my experience, most of the students that do score these positions in just amazing places, it's because they have prior experience working in a lab, first and foremost, and second of all, a tangible product of that research. A publication is the holy grail, but if you presented a poster at a conference, more often than not, that's precisely how these connections are made. You start with research in a university, you present your results at the American Institute of Chemical Engineer conference, somebody from BASF looks at your poster, you strike this connection, you apply for an internship, and before you know it, you're working with BASF, and then you get an offer, from them. I've seen this happen, and so I don't think it will derail at all that career path. It would actually assist.
Any other comments on that, Dr. Kilgore?
I could not agree more. I mean, we talk about connections and who you know and that thing, but you will never be penalized for pushing yourself out there and making yourself known, working at something that was hard, not easy. That everybody likes to see that in the lab and in industry. I could not agree more.
Dr. Chaplin, did you have a comment also?
Yes, I agree as well. And irrespective of your career choice being towards industry or academia, if you're looking for a graduate degree, having undergraduate research experience is a huge advantage in getting admitted to a good program. So there's no negative.
I can also speak for students who are applying for major competitive award opportunities to maybe take them for study abroad or a variety of different opportunities. Undergraduate research can be pivotal as well. So I would strongly encourage as well. We have another question from Braden. It seems that most research opportunities require in-person interaction, potentially over break. If someone does not live in the Lexington area over break, would you recommend arranging a temporary housing option in Lexington, or are there online opportunities for research? Dr. Kramer, would you like to?
Well, I would say it depends on the research field, the discipline. There are going to be some areas that are just easier to do kind of online research and participate more. But I think there are ways of being involved with the faculty during any kind of a break that could subsequently advantage you in doing research the following semester, et cetera. But I'd let others sort of comment about what goes on during the break.
I do have a comment. It's entirely anecdotal, but it does illustrate the answer to this question. And that is, we have some funding available right now in our laboratory. And with the funding agency, we were basically almost contractually obligated to involve students in research. And so taking that into account, we scrambled and we got like pretty creative to line up remote research experiences for some of these students. We have a colleague at the Department of Chemistry that is also associated faculty at CAR who does computational research. And so it's research that can actually be performed remotely. And so we have right now a couple, we may get another person shortly who is already participating in that project. And that is, they're actually away from Lexington. And so, yes, as Dr. Kramer was saying, it's very dependent on the type of research and also the kind of accommodations that can be made. But hopefully that does illustrate that it is indeed possible.
Thank you very much. Dr. Chaplin.
If I could take the counter argument, I know we are forced to do mostly online these days, but for labs that are heavy on experimentation, the best way to learn is doing it in person. And although we are limited with the number of students we can have in the lab these days, on a regular time frame, being available for your faculty mentor to work during the so-called breaks, but research never takes a break, sort of guarantees you a very privileged time with your mentor. I actually have a summer student working with me right now that has me on a much more, I'm much more available to train and teach her really one-on-one, being virtually or socially in a social distance safe way, compared to the rest of the year where we are also teaching and have much more students in the lab. Our time gets really divided. So if you have the opportunity to stay during summer breaks or winter breaks, I think it is the time where, in a sense, faculty mentors have a little more time to teach you. I don't know if you all agree, but.
We are nearing the end of our hour, and I know that Dr. Chaplin has answered a couple of questions online. So hopefully we have gotten people's questions addressed. If not, we can give, someone can unmute and ask a final question. But is there anyone that had a final question? I guess I should give a moment. All right, did one new message come in? Let me see if there's any. Oh, it was a thank you. And that's what I was gonna do, so that's good timing. I was gonna say thank you to all of our panel, Dr. Chaplin, Dr. Kilgore, Dr. Kramer, Dr. Santillan Jimenez, for providing their expertise and energy for our panel this morning. And I also wanna thank all of the students and staff at UK who contributed to the questions. We are delighted to have been able to offer this event today. We are looking to do some more opportunities over the course of the summer so that we can continue to engage students about research and award opportunities. So thank you, all of you, for your time. We're very appreciative. And we will be posting this recording online again. So if you wanted to go back and check a comment or look at the faculty name or something, that will be available to you probably within a couple of days. Thank you all very much for your participation today.
Thank you.
Thank you.